champion and they make me the underdog, I'm gonna show them all they're wrong because I'm the champion. I'm the real champion.
Muhammad Ali was the greatest boxer who ever lived. We all know that. But no fighter can achieve greatness alone because legacies are defined by rivalries. And even Ali needed the right dance partners to make him great. During his career, Ali shared the ring with some legendary names, but the opponent who propelled him to greatness more than any other, and a fighter who achieved greatness himself in doing so, was Smokin Joe Frazier.
Heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Frazier.
And this is his story. Frazier was a man who never had it easy. He was the 12th child in a family of sharecroppers from Beaufort, South Carolina, and he grew up helping his parents farm their patch of low-quality land where little of value could be grown. He came to boxing largely as the result of a throwaway comment from one of his uncles who noticed his stocky build and joked he would be the next Joe Louis. Taking inspiration from these words, young Joe took an old burlap sack and filled it with whatever he could find, including old corn cobs, rags, Spanish moss, and a brick to improvise a heavy bag. From that day on, he spent an hour a day practically every day for the next 6 or 7 years, hitting that bag to train himself in boxing in the hope of making his uncle's prediction come true. A few years later, Frazier was forced to leave the farm when he had a run-in with the white landowners whose farmland his family worked. One of the owners threatened to whip him, but Frazier stood his ground, telling the owner to keep his pants up because nobody would be whipping him that day. Frazier was just 15 at the time, but even so, the landowner decided to leave his belt in place rather than tangling with the tough, thick-set youth standing in front of him. Frazier's days on the farm were numbered, though, and his mother told him that if he couldn't get on with the white folks, he would have to leave. So he saved up and took the bus to Philadelphia, where he settled. In Philadelphia, he continued boxing and embarked upon a successful amateur career. As an amateur, he was defeated only twice, both controversial points losses to Buster Mathis. The second of these defeats saw Mathis awarded a place on the U.S. Olympic team, and this bitter loss caused Frazier to consider his future in the sport. But this was not the ending that destiny had planned for Frazier's career, and fate was poised to step in and change the course of his life, and ultimately, boxing history. In the build-up to the Olympics, Mathis failed to train properly. Frazier, on the other hand, reapplied himself to his training regime with renewed vigor, taking on all comers in the sparring ring. This meant that when Mathis fell sick, Frazier was perfectly placed to take his spot on the team. And having been given a second chance, Frazier was not to be denied. At the games, Frazier made it through to the semifinal without too much trouble, but in his semifinal bout, he badly damaged his thumb. Rather than telling his coaches, though, he kept the injury to himself. He then went on to defeat German boxer Hans Huber in the final with only one good hand, making him the only U.S. boxer to claim gold in that edition of the Games. With an Olympic gold in his pocket, Frazier was ready to turn pro, and he quickly collected a string of victories that established him as a serious contender in the pro ranks. However, in 1967, just as Frazier was emerging at the top of the heavyweight rankings, champion Ali was stripped of his world titles for refusing the draft to go and fight in Vietnam, beginning his 3-year hiatus from the sport. This left the WBA and the WBC, along with the New York State Athletic Commission, without a champion, so a series of eliminators were held to establish a new heavyweight king. Frazier won his eliminators and was elevated to champion by the New York State Athletic Commission after defeating his old foe, Buster Mathis. He then claimed the WBA and WBC straps by beating Jimmy Ellis not long after. So Frazier was now officially proclaimed heavyweight champion of the world. But despite owning all the belts, he had no claim to the lineal title, and he knew that many would continue to view him as nothing but a paper champion until he defeated Ali inside a ring. And so everything was in place for the two to ignite a rivalry and a feud that would define the era and set both men on the path to heavyweight immortality. As we now fondly remember, Ali was a notorious loudmouth trash talker who liked to do everything he could to get under his opponent's skin. And during the long build-up to his first fight with Frazier, he ramped up the volume to the maximum. Frazier, on the other hand, couldn't have been more different. He was a devout Christian Baptist, and he preferred to remain quiet and respectful during the build-up to his fights, instead allowing his fists to do the talking after the sound of the first bell. During Ali's enforced exile from the sport, Frazier had even come out in support of Ali in his anti-war stance. He backed Ali's decision to resist the draft and went as far as petitioning then-President Nixon to have Ali's boxing license reinstated. Whether he did this for Ali's benefit or whether he did it because he knew he would never be universally accepted as heavyweight champion until he defeated Ali in the ring is another matter. But what's beyond doubt is that initially, he was on Ali's side. However, once Ali was granted permission to box again and the build-up to their fight began in earnest, things changed quickly. Ali's activism had made him an even more prominent public figure than ever, and he used his popularity among black nationalists, civil rights campaigners, and anti-war protesters to galvanize his support. At the same time, he tried to cast Joe Frazier as the establishment fighter and the white man's hope, even turning many black boxing fans against him by calling him Uncle Tom, a term used to refer to a black person who is excessively subservient to whites and white authority. This deeply antagonized Frazier, who felt betrayed by Ali, and Frazier responded by calling him a cheap shot son of a. For his part, Frazier insisted on referring to Ali as Clay rather than Muhammad Ali, something that likely riled Ali just as much as being called Uncle Tom upset Frazier. The fight, held in New York's Madison Square Garden, became one of the most eagerly anticipated sporting events in years and was portrayed variously as the draft dodger versus the patriot, the poetry-spouting Muslim versus the quiet Bible-reading Baptist, or even the black militant against Uncle Tom. Billed as the fight of the century, it was to be the first time two undefeated heavyweights, both with a valid claim on the title, would meet to dispute the heavyweight championship of the world. The great and the good from New York society turned out to the arena dressed for the occasion. Frank Sinatra was in attendance as an accredited photographer, and Burt Lancaster featured on commentary duty for the broadcast. The stage was set. Now, as we all know, the quality of the boxing in a big fight doesn't always match the build-up. But this time, the action didn't disappoint. Surprisingly, Ali chose to plant his feet early on, rather than dance around the powerful smaller man, turning the fight into much more of a slugfest than many had expected. Ali had some success, catching Frazier with single shots and combinations. But Frazier pressed on and began to take control, relentlessly stalking his man, taunting him, shrugging off any punches Ali managed to land, and pinning Ali on the ropes while teeing off with his infamous left hook whenever he could. As the fight wore on, Ali began to dance more, trying to stay out of the way of Frazier's powerful punches while firing back when possible. But then finally, with Ali on wobbly legs, Frazier caught him in the 15th, sending him to the canvas. Incredibly, Ali was back on his feet by the count of just 3 and made it through to the end of the round. But the victory was awarded to Frazier by unanimous decision. It was the first time Ali had tasted defeat. In the build-up, Ali had claimed he would crawl across the ring and proclaim Frazier the greatest should he manage to defeat him. But this he failed to do. Instead, he ungraciously called the result a white man's decision. Having defeated Ali, Frazier was at last universally recognized as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. But having reached the pinnacle of the sport, he would go on to lose his title to George Foreman in Kingston, Jamaica, less than 3 years later. In the intervening years, the feud between Frazier and Ali continued to simmer, and with neither man now in possession of a world title, a rematch was scheduled. Ali vanquished Frazier in a bout that was marred by excessive clinching, and the final showdown between the two, a fight destined to go down as one of the most brutal confrontations in heavyweight history, was on. Billed as the Thrilla in Manila and held in Quezon City, Metro Manila in the Philippines, this fight not only lived up to their first meeting, but even exceeded it. Scheduled for 15 rounds, the fight ebbed and flowed, with both men absorbing incredible amounts of punishment and unwilling to back down. At the end of the 14, Ali had had enough, telling his trainer he was done and that he couldn't fight on. His corner ignored his words and pushed him back out for the 15th. only for Frazier to remain on his stool with a closed left eye, a right eye that wasn't far behind, and a deep cut on his face. Ali later remarked that the fight had been the closest thing to dying that I know of. And in Ali's opinion, the fight was his greatest performance and one of the finest victories of his career. After this bout, Frazier lost his next fight in a rematch with George Foreman and then retired from the sport. He returned to the ring once more 5 years later to fight out a majority draw with Floyd Cummings and then hung them up for good with a final professional record of 32 and 4-1, with 27 of his wins coming by way of knockout. Although nobody can doubt Ali's greatness both inside and outside the ring, his 3 memorable tussles with Frazier took his fame and his legend to another level. For Frazier, despite losing overall, the 3 fights and 41 rounds he shared with Ali also granted him entry into the pantheon of the heavyweight all-time greats. That Frazier was able to hit such heights was all the more remarkable in light of the disadvantages he faced. Joe Frazier stood at just over 5 feet 11 inches, and in his first fight with Ali, he weighed in at only 205.5 pounds. To put that into context, the modern cruiserweight limit is 200 pounds, and current unified heavyweight champ Oleksandr Usyk has tended to come in at around the 220 to 225 pound mark for most of his heavyweight fights. So Frazier was always considered small for a heavyweight. In addition, during his youth, he damaged his arm when he slipped running from the family's hog, and from then on, he was never able to fully straighten his arm. Later, while training as an amateur in Philadelphia, some shards of metal from a faulty speed bag flew into his eye, inflicting serious damage. For the rest of his career, he was forced to conceal his condition from doctors during pre-fight checkups. And by the time of his 3rd fight with Ali, he was all but blind in one eye. Furthermore, during his first fight with Ali, he was also suffering from hypertension and a kidney infection, yet he somehow managed to overcome this adversity to inflict the first L of Ali's career. Frazier's time as a boxer was always marked by an undeniable determination to succeed, even against the odds. But unfortunately, his life after boxing turned out to be less glorious. While contemporaries such as Ali, Foreman, and later Larry Holmes became millionaires and remained wealthy once they retired, Frazier was a notoriously bad businessman. Although it is estimated that he should have been worth around $100 million, he lived out his later years in a single-room apartment above the iconic gym he ran in his adopted hometown of Philadelphia. He surrounded himself with bad advisors and people who were only there to take what they could get from him, and although he didn't die in poverty, towards the end, he was by no means rich either, a sad end for a man who deserves so much more. Above all, Frazier will always be remembered for the 3 times he shared the ring with Ali. In later life, his attitude towards Ali mellowed somewhat, and by 2009, he stated that he no longer retained any hard feelings. However, by 2006, he was still convinced he had won all 3 fights. And in his autobiography published that year, he continued to refer to Ali as Clay throughout. For his part, Ali claimed he had only ever been trying to sell the fight and that he hadn't meant the things he had said. Yet although he apologized to Frazier's son, he never apologized to Frazier himself face to face. Joe Frazier died at the age of 67 after a battle with liver cancer, with Floyd Mayweather Jr. paying for his funeral. Among other stars from boxing and the wider world of entertainment, Muhammad Ali himself was present at the ceremony. When he learned of Frazier's death, Ali remarked that, "The world has lost a great champion. I will always remember Joe with respect and admiration." So it's clear that whatever animosity there was between the pair in life, there was also deep respect along with an appreciation of the fact that both of their careers and reputations were immeasurably enhanced through the unbreakable bonds they forged in the heat of battle. What do you think? Would Ali always have been the greatest boxer of all time? Or did he need Frazier to help him achieve greatness? Why not leave us a comment below to let us know your view? And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop us a like and subscribe to the channel to help us keep producing more boxing content like this. See you in the next one.